Hi guys, I'm Miss Myers and I'm a middle school art teacher. Today I'm going to be reading this book. It's called The People's Painter, How Ben Shahn Fought for Justice with Art by Cynthia Levinson, pictures by Evan Turk. Before beginning this book, I thought that it'd be important to mention that originally this book starts in Lithuania, which is a northeastern country in Europe. It was an area within the Russian Empire where Jews were allowed to live. About 4 years after, it's where the Tsar actually ordered a tax on the Jews. Some words I'm going to try and pronounce, but probably going to butcher throughout the reading of this. Mame is mother. Tate is father. Zadeh is grandfather. Shtetl, a small Jewish town in Europe. And then Kedar is an elementary school. The first thing I can remember, Ben said, I drew. From the time he could grasp a pencil, Ben Shahn yearned to draw everything he saw in his village in Lithuania. His mama, Jital, hands molding sturdy plates from slippery clay. His tate, Hessel, carving stout chairs out of spruce trees. And his tate's, Zadeh, chiseling wood skates so Ben could skim across the frozen Neris River. But paper was a luxury in the shtetl, and there was none to spare. So with his finger, Ben traced the Hebrew letters that curled and curved through his book of Bible stories. Then he couldn't stop himself. He sketched in the margins. Some Bible stories, though, enraged Ben, especially when good people got hurt. That's not right. Ben also protested when his Kedar teacher wasn't fair. After a classmate pulled a prank, the teacher kept everyone indoors, demanding the culprit's name. I'm not going to tell who did it, Ben declared, and I'm not going to pay for something that I didn't do. Refusing to tattle, he walked out. Gotta love a little rebellion. Justice had mattered to Ben ever since he was little. He was only 4 when the Tsar Nicholas II soldiers hurled rocks through the windows and dragged his father away. Just because Tata had been demanding fair pay for working people, he was banished to frigid, far-off Siberia. So only about 4 years after Lithuania was a place where Jewish people were allowed to live, the Tsar basically began attacking them. But Ben didn't know yet how to draw his outrage. But feeling his father's boldness inside himself, he marched up to the sentry at the end of the street and shouted, "Down with the Tsar!" The soldier chased after him, but Ben managed to escape. What a brave kid. Tata eventually escaped too, and in 1906, he made his way from Siberia to America. He wrote to Gittel, "Come." 8-year-old Ben, his brother Philip, his sister Hattie, and his mama packed their belongings, but Zaideh could not leave the shtetl, the only home he knew. As the stagecoach pulled away, Ben had to let go of his grandfather's hand. He wailed. Some visual clues. America bewildered the new immigrant. Trains overhead and underground. A cramped two-tenant apartment for the whole family. A chair that rocked and nearly dumped him over backwards. Not at all like Tata's. Tomatoes. Ick. Anybody else hate tomatoes, or is it just me? There's the family. And in school, Ben stared at what seemed like thousands of letters in all different shapes and styles and sizes, all different from Hebrew. Even worse, bullies tormented him about his clothes and his accent, and they called him names just because he was Jewish. Sometimes, though, they'd pause if he chalked their portraits on the sidewalk. No one drew people better than Ben. It must be so hard to go to another country where you don't know the language and you're trying to figure it out as a young person. Seeing his cravings to draw, a teacher gave him watercolors. Another paid him to pen calligraphy, elegantly curving letters, all in English. By the time he was 12, Ben was determined to become an artist. To do that, he needed to finish high school, go to college. He needed to learn about colors, lines, anatomy. But his father lost his job. And when Ben turned 14, his mother ordered him to leave school and go to work. He argued bitterly, send Philip instead, but his family needed whatever Ben could earn. So he apprenticed to a lithographer who hand-lettered signs for billboards and chiseled them into stone storefronts. By day, Ben carefully copied those thousands of English letters. He spent months on the letter A, tracing and carving every curl and every curve. Then he moved on to the letter B. Gradually, he fell in love with these letters too. After 5 years, he mastered the craft, and his signs began to appear around the city. So this is something that's a bit of a lost art, and you guys will have no understanding unless you look back at like the history books or go to some kind of art school to learn how to do this, but it really was a craft of its own. It's kind of like block printing for those of you who did that in 6th grade, like literally carving out every single letter so that way it could be typed and printed on giant billboards or in newspapers. Meanwhile, at night, Ben went to art school, hoping to perfect his portraits. But there was a problem. Ben's teacher taught landscapes, purple shadowed valleys, misty haystacks, fields of cows. Ben argued that shadows are not purple, and he detested cows. I like stories and people, he explained. Stories about people fighting injustice, about workers like Tata, like loved ones like Zadeh, and immigrants like himself. His teachers, though, insisted that paintings weren't supposed to tell stories, that pictures should be beautiful, but not represent real life. I think this is where his teachers are wrong. Since he didn't want to portray pleasant pastures or cows, Ben wondered if he was an artist after all. Maybe he should only make signs. Nearly 30 years old now, confused and discouraged, he quit school, stopped painting, and sailed to Europe, then on to Africa. In museums, he gazed at centuries of pictures. This may be art, but is it my own art? He pondered. During that time, protests over unfair trial in America also caught Ben's eye. 2 Italian-American men, Nicolao Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, I am not Italian, but I tried. Were executed in 1927 for a murder they probably did not commit. The judge and jury believed they must be guilty since they were very poor immigrants and opposed democracy. Here was something to paint, Ben later exclaimed, infuriated at the injustice. If I am to be a painter, I must show the world how it looks through my eyes, not theirs. What shall I paint? Stories? He returned home and told their tale in 23 pictures, even though his teachers had insisted that he must not tell stories, and people flocked to see them, even if they weren't pretty. So he had a gallery opening. White patriarchy. Ben didn't stop there. He painted other stories about outsiders, working people, prisoners, and Jews who had been mistreated, just like Tata. His portraits were so powerful that in 1935, the United States government hired him. It was the Great Depression and jobs were so scarce. So was food. President Franklin D. Roosevelt wanted Americans to see that poor people needed a helping hand from Washington. For this job, instead of painting on canvas, Ben borrowed a camera. With his friend, Bernarda Bryson, whom he later married, he crisscrossed the countryside taking photographs that revealed hard lives in troubled times. Young cotton pickers in Arkansas, impoverished families in Mississippi, manual laborers in Louisiana, child coal miners in Pennsylvania. Many people didn't know how desperate things were until they saw Ben's photo stories in schools, libraries, and magazines. They urged politicians to pass laws to make sure workers got jobs, families were fed, and children could go to school. So the US government actually hired photographers to document America. One of my favorite photographers is actually Dorothea Lange, who was also hired during this time to take photos of the Dust Bowl in the Midwest, where there was widespread poverty. Okay. The government hired Ben again in 1937. This time to paint a mural in a new village named Jersey. Homesteads. President Roosevelt's New Deal program had built the town so garment workers, most of them Jewish, could move from city apartments to the airy countryside. What story would Ben tell? His own. In 3 scenes, he showed immigrants, including Mame, arriving poor and bewildered in America, working hard, demanding fair pay, and finally settling happily in Jersey homesteads. To Ben, the village felt like a shtetl. He and Bernarda liked it so much they moved there. Their children walked by the mural at school every day. So you can be an artist and good at all different kinds of things. While some parts of the government displayed Ben's works, others didn't trust him. In the 1940s and the 1950s, congressmen accused him of being disloyal because he didn't paint Purple Mountain Majesties or America the Beautiful. Instead, he shed light on Americans who lived in the shadows. One wintry day, 2 men appeared at Ben's door and flashed their IDs, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They questioned him relentlessly. Why do you support workers, immigrants, civil rights? Isn't America fine just the way it is? Which of your friends are enemies of America? Ben politely served them tea and cake, but refused to tattle. So the FBI threatened to deport him to Lithuania, just as Tsar had done, exiled Tate to Siberia. But Ben was not disloyal. I am the most American of all American painters, he later said. Eventually, the FBI backed down. Anyway, threats had never scared Ben. I hate injustice, he declared. For the next 16 years, Ben continued to portray stories of people clamoring for their rights, civil rights activists, workers demanding fair pay, political protesters, advocates for peace. Americans loved Ben's art so much they called him the people's painter. Ben drew until the end of his life, handing down his stories of justice from generation to generation. When he was a Zaide himself, a grandfather, Ben encouraged young artists to sketch anywhere, especially in the margins. So he was not only a grandfather, he also became a teacher. If you liked this story, on one of the last pages, there's an author's note here, and it gives more information about Ben's career and all the different types of art he did, because he didn't just stick with one medium. He was not just a painter. He did lots of different kinds of art. Over here, it talks about the illustrator, what inspired them. I have to say I really enjoyed the illustrations. I don't know if you guys noticed. I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. Many of his pictures sort of feel collage-esque. They're a combination of paints, oil pastels, photographs that have been painted on top of different elements that have basically been cut and pasted together. A lot of different work went into this. The other thing on this back page that I thought was really interesting is it sort of gives an important historical timeline that just sort of summarizes the major events that were going on during this story and Ben's life. I don't know about you, but I found this book to be really good for many reasons. I also thought that many of the topics that were discussed in this book are actually still relevant today, even though these occurred a long time ago. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy it. It is available for you guys to check out from Miss Weeby in our Grimoire Library. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.